So when I was 13 years old, my parents sent me to boarding school as a way to facilitate their divorce. My mother didn't want my father to have me. My father didn't want my mother to have me, so they sent me to boarding school. And in a way, it was good. It got me out of the house. But it really did seal up any sense of family was gone. You know, my family dissolved. They were divorced about 2 weeks after I got to boarding school. And so at the time, you know, I had all of these layers, right? I had the gender issues, I had the mom leaving and abandonment issues, I had the sexual abuse issues. All of that was there, and I didn't know any of that. What I did know is that starting my freshman year in high school, I started to fall in love with my friends, my female friends. I was very attached. I got very attached to my best friend in high school, my freshman year, and that was not reciprocated. So that was just painful. But the second year, I got attached to a girl who was a senior, and it was reciprocated, and that was the first physical relationship that I had that really was sort of intimate and felt like love, and I felt so full, and so there was sort of a sense of relief in that relationship. Well, then she graduated, and that was tremendously painful, sort of reopened the whole abandonment wound for me. When I first fell in love with my first friend, as it was, I felt like I just wanted to be with her all the time. I felt like being with her, I felt like I was worth something. I was valued if I was with her. And then when it was reciprocated in my second year, it felt like I was no longer alone. And that was a huge relief to my heart. I just didn't want to be alone. And her affection and her care for me, it took away that lonely feeling. It made me feel like I had value, and it really felt tremendously comforting to me. I was surprised, you know. I didn't expect to be a lesbian. I didn't sort of say, okay, now we're going to go be a lesbian. It was more like the feeling crept up on me, and I just couldn't get this woman out of my mind. I thought about her all the time. I wanted to be with her all the time. I wrote her notes all the time. It didn't occur to me that I was walking into lesbianism. I was too young, and back then it wasn't quite so talked about. So I didn't say, oh, this must be my lesbian, that must be what I am. It was more like, wow, I just love this girl, you know, she's so wonderful. I remember distinctly my junior year in high school, I became involved with a girl, and that was perhaps my pivotal lesbian relationship. It lasted longer. It was much more intense. It was very, very absorbing. And I had this memory of putting my hand on her shoulder and thinking to myself, as I looked at my hand on her shoulder, I can see my soul leaving my body and going into her. And it feels so beautiful. And this must be true love. This must be what it is to love someone. To not know where I end and she begins. We are becoming one. This must be just what it's really all about. It's odd because there was a double thing going on here. I didn't feel any shame about my feelings for especially not this woman, the last lover I had, because it was so intoxicating and so wonderful and such a relief to me, and I was so happy in this relationship that shame was not a part of it, but it was a secret. And obviously my external persona, I had really suppressed femininity. People could see that I had suppressed femininity. All of my childhood, I wasn't able to identify with my same-sex peers because I didn't want to be one of them. And so there was an isolation from my peers, and that continued on through high school. And so in elementary school, as well as in high school, periodically people would make comments like, Christy's gay, or Christy's a lesbian, and I remember distinctly somebody calling me a dyke, and that was such a painful thing. So I don't quite know why that was so painful, since it was essentially, it was more or less embracing this relationship, but to be called a dyke, to be called a lesbian, really cut me to the core. It felt horrible, and I walked in the shame of that. So there was the extent to which my community rejected me because of my feelings, that really brought shame. But the feelings themselves, I wasn't like ashamed to be in love with this woman. One of the challenges of not identifying with my mom way back when I was a child was that I couldn't really bond with her. I didn't really connect with her in a way that fed who I was. And moms do, same-sex parents help establish a sense of being, help establish a sense of who you are. And if I can't connect with my mother, then I lose that from the very beginning. And that was certainly the case with me. I couldn't get a sense of who I was from her. And then later, as you hit puberty, it's the father's job to call you out as a woman and to say, this is what it is to be opposite, other from me, and to be a flower and a beautiful flower and treasured by men. Of course, I didn't get any of that. And so it's combined, I had no real sense of who I really was. I had constructed this self that sort of was functioning, but none of it was called forth from who I truly was. So bring that into relationship. I was on the hunt for me. I was on the hunt for completion. I was sort of a shadow of a person that I had made, but I didn't really know who that was. So this lover that I had in high school, she personified much of what I thought was excellent in a person. She was strong, she was thoughtful, she was gentle, and she had this quiet wisdom about her that I really was drawn to. And I was really wanting those attributes for myself. I was really looking for myself in her. Much later, I discovered that I have many of those attributes, that is part of who God created. And so I saw it in her, and I wanted it, and I was attracted to it.